The flickering neon sign of the Golden State Diner cast a sickly yellow glow across Sarah's tear-streaked face. The lukewarm coffee in her trembling hands did little to thaw the icy grip of fear that had taken root deep within her. It had been exactly 1 year since her younger sister, Emily, vibrant and full of life, had become another faceless statistic in the growing list of victims attributed to the phantom known only as the Nightshade Killer. He haunted California like a malevolent whisper, snatching young women in the dead of night, leaving no trace but the chilling signature of a single black dahlia placed delicately on their lifeless forms. The police were baffled, the media was in a frenzy, and the state was gripped by a terror that seeped into the very fabric of daily life. For Sarah, however, it was more than just fear. It was a gnawing, relentless ache of guilt. Emily had called her that night, her voice bubbly with excitement about a new job offer. Sarah, exhausted from a grueling shift as a nurse, had cut the conversation short, promising to call back in the morning. That morning never came. The news reports blared Emily's picture, her bright smile now a haunting reminder of Sarah's last, dismissive words. "I'm busy, Em. Talk to you later." The words echoed in her mind, a constant, agonizing refrain. Detective Miles Corbin was a man etched with the weariness of countless sleepless nights. His eyes, the color of a stormy Pacific, held a deep-seated frustration. The Nightshade Killer was his white whale, a phantom who moved through the shadows with an unnerving intelligence. Every lead turned cold. Every potential suspect vanished into thin air. The pressure from the governor's office was immense, the public outcry deafening. He felt the weight of every grieving family, their silent accusations a heavy burden on his soul. What the public didn't know was the subtle shift Corbin had noticed in the killer's patterns. Initially, the victims seemed random, young women from different walks of life, found in disparate locations. But in the last 3 months, a chilling connection had emerged. Each victim had a fleeting, almost insignificant link to a single organization, Project Flourish, a statewide youth mentorship program. Emily had been a volunteer there. Corbin had initially dismissed it as a coincidence, a desperate attempt to find order in chaos. But the nagging feeling persisted, a discordant note in the symphony of terror. He had assigned a junior detective to discreetly look into Project Flourish, a task that seemed like a wild goose chase. Meanwhile, Sarah had immersed herself in the investigation, not as a law enforcement official, but as a grieving sister driven by an insatiable need for justice. She devoured every news article, every police press release, searching for a clue, a detail that others might have overlooked. She visited the locations where the bodies were found, trying to reconstruct Emily's last moments, to understand the darkness that had swallowed her sister whole. She started her own unofficial investigation into Project Flourish. She volunteered at a local chapter, her quiet demeanor and genuine empathy allowing her to connect with the other volunteers and the young people they mentored. She listened intently to their stories, their anxieties, their hopes, searching for a thread, a whisper that might lead her to the killer. Weeks turned into months. Corbin's junior detective reported nothing of significance from Project Flourish. Corbin's frustration mounted. He felt like he was chasing a ghost, a figment of the public's worst nightmares. The Black Dahlias mocked him, their silent beauty a stark contrast to the brutal reality of the murders. Sarah, however, was beginning to see patterns. Subtle connections between some of the volunteers, hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when she approached, a shared, almost imperceptible unease that hung in the air. One name kept surfacing in these veiled interactions. Mr. Silas Thorne, a prominent benefactor of Project Flourish, a charismatic and influential figure in the community. He was lauded for his philanthropy, his dedication to the youth. He was also, Sarah discovered through her own discreet inquiries, a man shrouded in a carefully constructed privacy. The dramatic irony was a suffocating blanket. The public, the police were hunting a shadow, while the monster might be hiding in plain sight, cloaked in respectability and goodwill. Sarah felt a cold dread creep into her heart. Could someone so admired, so seemingly benevolent, be capable of such unspeakable evil? Corbin, still wrestling with the dead ends, decided to revisit the victims' personal lives. He meticulously went through their digital footprints, their social media, their emails. He found nothing overtly suspicious, but a recurring theme caught his attention. Several of the victims had, in the weeks leading up to their deaths, expressed vague anxieties, a feeling of being watched, of something not being right. These anxieties were often dismissed by their friends and family as stress or paranoia. He also noticed a peculiar detail in the crime scene photos, something he had initially overlooked. Tiny, almost microscopic fibers, not belonging to the victims or the immediate surroundings, were found on the clothing of 3 of the victims. Forensic analysis revealed they were a rare type of imported silk, expensive and not commonly found. Sarah, meanwhile, had managed to get closer to Silas Thorne. She volunteered at a fundraising gala for Project Flourish, her quiet efficiency catching his eye. He was charming, attentive, and possessed an unnerving intensity in his gaze. During a brief conversation, she subtly steered the topic towards Emily, mentioning her sister's involvement with the program. Thorne's smile didn't falter, but Sarah noticed a fleeting flicker in his eyes, a shadow of something cold and calculating. Later that evening, while helping with the cleanup, Sarah stumbled upon a restricted access area. Driven by a gut feeling, she slipped inside. The room was Thorne's private office, opulent and unsettlingly sterile. On a large mahogany desk, amidst stacks of documents, lay a small, velvet box. Her heart pounded in her chest as she cautiously opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson satin, was a single, perfectly formed black dahlia. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The charming benefactor, the pillar of the community, was the monster who had stolen her sister's life. The dramatic irony was almost unbearable. Everyone was searching in the darkness, while the killer was bathed in the light of admiration. Just as Sarah's mind began to formulate a plan, a sound from behind made her whirl around. Silas Thorne stood in the doorway, his affable mask gone, replaced by a chillingly cold expression. In his hand, he held another black dahlia. Well, Sarah," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "It seems you've stumbled upon my little secret garden." Across town, Corbin was poring over the financial records of Project Flourish. A sudden, large and unexplained transaction caught his eye, a recent purchase of a significant quantity of rare, imported silk. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. The vague anxieties of the victims, the microscopic fibers, the connection to Project Flourish. It all pointed to someone within the organization, someone with access and influence. He remembered the junior detective's lukewarm reports, the lack of anything concrete. He had dismissed it too easily, blinded by the lack of obvious evidence. Now, a cold dread washed over him. He had been so close, yet so far. He grabbed his phone, his fingers flying across the keypad, dialing the number of the detective who had been monitoring Project Flourish. Sarah stood frozen, the velvet box clutched in her hand. Thorne took a step closer, his eyes glinting with a predatory satisfaction. "Your sister was special," he purred, his voice sending shivers down her spine. "They all were. Delicate flowers, waiting to be plucked." Rage, hot and fierce, surged through Sarah, eclipsing her fear. This man, this monster, had taken Emily's light, had shattered her family. She wouldn't let him claim another victim. Just as Thorne reached out, Sarah lunged, throwing the velvet box and its deadly contents at his face. He recoiled in surprise, giving her the precious seconds she needed to escape the office and race down the hallway. The sound of her pounding footsteps echoed through the silent building as she frantically searched for an exit, Thorne's enraged shouts echoing behind her. She burst through a fire exit and into the cool night air, the sprawling grounds of the Project Flourish headquarters stretching before her like a dark and menacing maze. Corbin's phone rang unanswered. A knot of apprehension tightened in his stomach. He had a terrible feeling. He grabbed his keys and raced out of the precinct, the sirens wailing in the distance, a soundtrack to his growing fear. Sarah ran blindly through the darkness, the image of Emily's smiling face fueling her desperate flight. She could hear Thorne's heavy footsteps gaining on her, his menacing presence a palpable weight in the darkness. She stumbled, her ankle twisting in the uneven terrain. Pain shot up her leg, but she pushed herself forward, knowing that stopping meant certain death. Suddenly, she saw it, a small, dilapidated shed at the edge of the property. Desperation lent her strength as she yanked open the creaking door and slipped inside, the darkness swallowing her whole. She held her breath, listening intently for any sign of her pursuer. Thorne's voice, closer now, cut through the silence. "You can't hide from me, Sarah. I always find my flowers." A wave of dramatic irony washed over her. She, the grieving sister, had unknowingly walked into the lion's den, drawn by her own desperate search for justice. The hunter had become the hunted. Just as Thorne's shadow fell across the shed's doorway, a piercing sound shattered the night, the unmistakable shriek of police sirens, growing louder with each passing second. Thorne froze, a look of disbelief and fury contorting his features. He had been so close. Sarah, hidden in the darkness, felt a sliver of hope ignite within her. Justice, it seemed, was finally arriving. But as the sirens reached a deafening crescendo, and the first flashing blue and red lights illuminated the shed, Thorne's eyes locked onto something in the darkness behind Sarah. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face. "You think it's over?" he whispered, his voice laced with a terrifying certainty. "It's only just beginning." Then, before Sarah could react, a figure emerged from the shadows behind her, a figure she recognized with a jolt of pure, unadulterated horror. It was Mrs. Albright, the kind, elderly volunteer coordinator at Project Flourish, a woman Sarah had confided in, a woman who had offered her comfort and support. In her hand, glinting in the flashing police lights, was a small, wickedly sharp gardening trowel. Her eyes, usually filled with warmth, were now cold and empty. "He's right, Sarah," Mrs. Albright said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "It's only just beginning. We have so many more flowers to tend to." The shed door burst open, and Detective Corbin stood silhouetted against the flashing lights, his face a mask of grim determination. He had arrived, but the scene before him was far more complex, far more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. He had been hunting a ghost, but he had stumbled upon a garden of nightmares. The tableau in the shed was a tableau of chilling revelation. Detective Miles Corbin, his gun raised, stood frozen in the doorway, the flashing police lights painting the scene in stark, unsettling strokes. Silas Thorne, momentarily stunned, now wore a mask of chilling amusement. And behind Sarah, the kindly Mrs. Albright, her face a serene mask, held the gardening trowel with a grip that belied her age. "Drop it, Mrs. Albright." Corbin's voice was sharp, cutting through the siren's wail. The elderly woman didn't flinch. Her gaze remained fixed on Sarah, a strange, almost maternal concern in her eyes. "She understands, Detective. Don't you, dear? The garden needs tending. The weeds must be pulled." Sarah's mind reeled. Mrs. Albright, the gentle soul who always had a comforting word, a warm smile? It was an impossible betrayal, a twist of the knife far deeper than Thorne's malevolence. The dramatic irony was suffocating. She had sought solace in the very heart of the darkness. Thorne chuckled, a low, guttural sound that sent a shiver down Corbin's spine. "Foolish detective, you thought you were hunting a lone wolf? This is a pack, Corbin. A carefully cultivated garden." Corbin's gaze flickered between Thorne and Mrs. Albright, a dawning horror creeping into his stormy eyes. The meticulous planning, the lack of a clear pattern in the initial victims, the almost supernatural ability to evade capture. It all made a terrifying kind of sense now. Before Corbin could process the implications, Thorne lunged towards Sarah, knocking Mrs. Albright slightly off balance. He grabbed Sarah's arm, his grip like iron. "Come, little flower. You'll join our collection." Adrenaline surged through Sarah. She twisted violently, kicking out with her good leg, connecting with Thorne's shin. He roared in pain, momentarily loosening his grip. Sarah scrambled backwards, putting precious distance between them. "Mrs. Albright, what are you doing?" Sarah cried, her voice laced with disbelief and a profound sense of betrayal. The elderly woman's gaze softened slightly, a flicker of the warmth Sarah had come to trust. "Protecting the garden, dear. Protecting the balance." Corbin, seizing the opportunity, moved swiftly. He tackled Thorne, sending them both crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs. The struggle was brutal, fueled by Thorne's desperation and Corbin's grim determination. Outside, more officers swarmed the property, their shouts echoing through the night. The carefully manicured lawns of Project Flourish, once a symbol of hope and community, were now illuminated by the harsh glare of flashing lights, revealing a scene of terrifying chaos. As Corbin wrestled with Thorne, Sarah noticed Mrs. Albright inching towards the shed's back wall. Her eyes were fixed on a loose panel, her movements surprisingly agile for her age. With a grunt, she dislodged the panel, revealing a dark, narrow passage. "The roots run deep, Sarah," Mrs. Albright whispered, her gaze meeting Sarah's with a chilling intensity. "Deeper than you can imagine." Then, with surprising speed, she slipped into the passage, disappearing into the darkness. Corbin finally managed to subdue Thorne, cuffing him roughly. He looked up, his breath ragged, and his eyes widened as he saw the open passage. "What was that?" "Mrs. Albright, she escaped," Sarah stammered, her voice trembling. "There's a tunnel." The revelation sent a fresh wave of dread through Corbin. This wasn't just about Thorne. This was a network, a deeply entrenched evil that had been operating in plain sight. The scope of the horror was expanding. The ghost they were hunting had multiple faces. The following days were a whirlwind of investigation. Thorne, interrogated relentlessly, remained eerily calm, offering cryptic pronouncements about the beauty of the cycle and the inevitable bloom. He spoke of a philosophy, a twisted ideology that celebrated the taking of young lives as a form of artistic expression, a way to preserve their fleeting beauty. The tunnel behind the shed led to a series of underground chambers beneath the Project Flourish property. What they found there sent a chill to the bone. It was a macabre gallery, a testament to the killer's twisted obsession. Preserved flowers, meticulously arranged, adorned the walls alongside photographs of the victims, their eyes eerily lifelike. There were tools, surgical instruments, and journals filled with Thorne's disturbing philosophies and detailed accounts of his crimes. But Mrs. Albright was gone, vanished without a trace. The police launched a statewide manhunt, but she seemed to have dissolved into the very fabric of California. Her sudden transformation from a sweet old lady to a key player in a gruesome killing spree baffled everyone. Had she been coerced? Brainwashed? Or was her gentle demeanor merely a meticulously crafted facade? Sarah, though traumatized, became an invaluable asset to the investigation. Her insights into the dynamics of Project Flourish, her observations of the subtle interactions between the volunteers, provided crucial clues. She remembered hushed conversations, knowing glances, a shared sense of secrecy that she had initially dismissed as mere camaraderie. Now, these memories painted a sinister picture of a clandestine network operating within the seemingly benevolent organization. Corbin discovered financial irregularities within Project Flourish, hidden layers of funding that couldn't be easily traced. It appeared that Thorne's philanthropy was a front for something far more sinister, a way to gain access to potential victims and cultivate his garden. A disturbing pattern began to emerge from Thorne's journals. He didn't act alone. He referred to the gardener's hand, a guiding force, someone who selected the finest blooms and ensured the soil was fertile. The descriptions chillingly matched Mrs. Albright's demeanor and her cryptic pronouncements. The twist was a sickening realization. Thorne wasn't the mastermind. He was a meticulous executor, a devoted disciple in a larger, more terrifying cult of death. Mrs. Albright, the seemingly harmless volunteer coordinator, was the true architect of this nightmare. Weeks turned into months. Thorne remained in custody, a silent, unsettling presence. The manhunt for Mrs. Albright yielded no results. The public, initially relieved at Thorne's capture, grew increasingly uneasy as the realization dawned that the evil might not have been eradicated, that a key piece of the puzzle was still missing. Sarah tried to rebuild her life, the gaping wound of Emily's loss a constant ache. But the image of Mrs. Albright's serene yet chilling face haunted her dreams. The betrayal cut deep, a stark reminder that evil could wear the mask of kindness and trust. One evening, while reviewing the evidence collected from the underground chambers, Sarah stumbled upon something that had been overlooked. Tucked inside one of Thorne's journals, beneath a pressed black dahlia, was a small, intricately folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. It was a list written in elegant, flowing script. Names, dates, and locations, all seemingly random. But as Sarah cross-referenced the names with the victims of the Nightshade Killer, a horrifying pattern emerged. The list contained the names of all the known victims, along with dates that corresponded to their disappearances. At the bottom of the list, circled in red ink, was a single, unfamiliar name: Isabel Vance, Redwood Creek Retreat, October 31st. Today was October 30th. Redwood Creek Retreat was a secluded wellness center nestled deep in the redwood forests, a place of healing and tranquility. Sarah remembered Mrs. Albright mentioning it once, a place she found particularly serene. A cold dread washed over Sarah. Isabel Vance was the next flower to be plucked, and Mrs. Albright was already there, tending her deadly garden. Sarah immediately contacted Corbin, her voice urgent and filled with a renewed sense of terror. Corbin, initially skeptical, was quickly convinced by the chilling precision of the list. The manhunt for Mrs. Albright took on a desperate new urgency. As the police mobilized, Sarah felt a gnawing sense of responsibility. She couldn't stand by and let another innocent life be extinguished. Ignoring Corbin's pleas to stay safe, she got in her car and sped towards Redwood Creek Retreat, the image of Emily's vibrant smile warring with the chilling serenity of Mrs. Albright's face. She arrived at the retreat late that night, the towering redwood trees casting long, ominous shadows under the pale moonlight. The air was still and silent, the tranquility of the place now seeming sinister. She found the main lodge deserted. A sense of unease prickled her skin. Where was Isabel? Where was Mrs. Albright? Following a hunch, she made her way towards a secluded gazebo nestled near a small creek, a place of quiet contemplation. As she approached, she heard a soft humming, a familiar, almost lullaby-like tune. It was Mrs. Albright. Sarah peered cautiously through the foliage. In the soft glow of a lantern, she saw Mrs. Albright sitting beside a young woman with long, dark hair. Isabel Vance. Isabel looked pale and weak, her eyes glazed over. Mrs. Albright was gently stroking her hair, her expression one of serene affection. On a small table beside them lay a single black dahlia. "It's almost time, my dear," Mrs. Albright murmured, her voice soft and soothing. "Soon, you'll be part of the eternal garden." Sarah's blood ran cold. She had found them, but she was alone, facing a woman who had proven to be far more dangerous and cunning than anyone had imagined. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind Sarah. She whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing in the shadows, his eyes glinting with a predatory hunger, was Silas Thorne. He had escaped. A chilling smile spread across his face. "Did you really think it was over, Sarah? The garden always claims its due." Sarah was trapped, caught between the serene evil of Mrs. Albright and the brutal malice of Thorne. The dramatic irony was a crushing weight. She had come seeking justice, but she had walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. Just as Thorne took a step towards her, a low growl echoed from the deeper shadows of the forest. Two glowing yellow eyes pierced the darkness, followed by the massive, silent form of a mountain lion, its muscles coiled and ready to strike. It fixed its gaze not on Sarah, but on Silas Thorne. Thorne froze, his confident smirk replaced by a flicker of primal fear. He had always been the predator, never the prey. The mountain lion let out a deafening roar and lunged. The mountain lion's attack was swift and brutal. Thorne, caught completely off guard, let out a strangled cry as the powerful animal's claws raked across his chest. He stumbled backward, his eyes wide with terror, the hunter suddenly and violently transformed into the hunted. Sarah watched in stunned silence as the primal drama unfolded. The raw power of nature, unleashed in the serene stillness of the redwood forest, was a stark and visceral form of justice. Thorn, who had reveled in his control over life and death, was now at the mercy of a force far beyond his understanding. Mrs. Albright remained seated beside the dazed Isabel, her expression unchanged, almost as if this savage intervention was an expected part of the garden's cycle. The lantern light cast eerie shadows on her placid face, making her seem less like a frail old woman and more like an ancient, implacable entity. The mountain lion, its initial assault successful, circled Thorn, a low growl rumbling in its chest. Thorn, bleeding and terrified, tried to scramble away, but the animal was too quick, too powerful. With another ferocious leap, it brought him down, its teeth sinking into his neck. The struggle was brief and horrifyingly decisive. Silas Thorn, the Nightshade Killer, the man who had haunted California's nightmares, lay still beneath the silent gaze of the ancient redwoods. Only then did Mrs. Albright finally turn her attention to the scene. Her eyes, devoid of any emotion, lingered on Thorn's lifeless form for a moment before settling on the mountain lion, which had now retreated back into the shadows as silently as it had appeared. It was as if it had served its purpose and vanished back into the wild heart of the forest. "Nature has its own way of pruning, Sarah," Mrs. Albright said, her voice calm and conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "Sometimes the garden takes care of its own imbalances." Sarah finally found her voice, a trembling whisper. You orchestrated this?" A faint smile touched Mrs. Albright's lips. "The garden provides. One must simply understand its rhythms." Just then, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, their insistent wail cutting through the stillness of the night. The police had finally arrived. Corbin was among the first to reach the gazebo, his face a mixture of relief at finding Sarah unharmed and shock at the scene before him. Thorn's mangled body, the dazed Isabel, and the seemingly unfazed Mrs. Albright created a tableau of surreal horror. "What in God's name happened here?" Corbin demanded, his gaze sweeping over the scene. Sarah, still reeling, could only point towards the receding shadows where the mountain lion had disappeared. A mountain lion. It attacked him. Corbin's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding his features. It seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed. But the evidence was undeniable. Thorn's wounds were clearly the result of a wild animal attack. As officers secured Isabel and cautiously approached Mrs. Albright, Corbin turned his attention to the elderly woman. "Mrs. Albright, you're under arrest." Mrs. Albright offered no resistance. Her serene composure remained unbroken as she was led away, her eyes occasionally flicking towards Sarah with that unsettlingly gentle gaze. The aftermath was a strange blend of relief and lingering unease. Isabel Vance was rescued, shaken but alive. Thorn was dead, his reign of terror finally over. But the capture of Mrs. Albright revealed a depth of depravity that chilled the state to its core. During the interrogation, Mrs. Albright remained enigmatic. She spoke of the garden's needs, of maintaining a delicate balance, of the beauty of sacrifice. She never explicitly confessed to orchestrating the murders, but her words painted a chilling picture of a mind warped by a twisted ideology. It became clear that she had been the guiding force behind Thorn's actions, the one who selected the victims and orchestrated their demise. The investigation into Project Flourish revealed the extent of Mrs. Albright's influence. She had subtly manipulated Thorn, preying on his insecurities and his twisted artistic sensibilities, molding him into her instrument of death. The financial irregularities were traced back to her, funds siphoned off to maintain the underground chambers and her macabre garden. The revelation that such evil could reside in the guise of a kindly old woman sent shockwaves through the community. The betrayal of trust was profound, the dramatic irony a bitter pill to swallow. The monster hadn't lurked in the shadows. It had sat beside them at community events, offering smiles and platitudes. The trial of Mrs. Albright was a somber affair. The prosecution presented a compelling case, piecing together Thorne's journals, the evidence from the underground chambers, and Sarah's harrowing testimony. Despite her calm demeanor and her refusal to explicitly confess, the jury found her guilty. She was sentenced to life in prison, a fate that seemed almost too merciful for the darkness she had harbored. Life slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy in California, the fear of the Nightshade Killer gradually receding. But for Sarah, the scars remained. The memory of Emily's last words, the chilling betrayal of Mrs. Albright, the visceral horror of Thorne's demise. These were wounds that time would never fully heal. 1 year later, Sarah found herself drawn back to the Redwood Creek retreat. The gazebo where she had confronted Mrs. Albright stood silent, bathed in the soft afternoon light. She placed a bouquet of wildflowers by the creek, a silent tribute to Emily and the other victims. As she turned to leave, she noticed something glinting in the earth near the gazebo. Kneeling down, she carefully unearthed a small, intricately carved wooden bird. It was a familiar object, one that Emily had cherished, a gift from their grandmother. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had searched everywhere for this after Emily's disappearance. How had it ended up here? A sudden, chilling realization washed over her. Mrs. Albright had been at the retreat long before Thorne had been apprehended. Had she left this intentionally? Was it a message? A taunt? As Sarah clutched the wooden bird in her trembling hand, a faint whisper seemed to drift on the gentle breeze, a whisper that sent a fresh wave of icy dread through her soul. The seeds have been sown, Sarah. The garden always finds a way to bloom again. Sarah looked around frantically, but she was alone. Yet, the chilling certainty of the whisper lingered in the air, a promise of future darkness, a terrifying cliffhanger in the ongoing nightmare. The predator had fallen, but the garden, it seemed, was far from barren.